All right, so I guess just to start off again, thanks a lot for joining me today. How'd you get involved with storytelling and screenwriting in general, especially since you came from like a rapping background mainly?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's interesting because writing and rapping were two things that really developed in parallel for me, and then they ended up sort of merging and giving me the screenwriting career that I have now. So a little bit of background, I was for a long time, I guess still technically am. I've never made a big retirement announcement, but I was a battle rapper named Kid Twist. And I had a big kind of come up in the late 2000s in a league here in Canada called King of the Dot. So that was a very, very exciting time in life. YouTube was pretty new. People were uploading battle rap videos there. It's kind of the wild west of the internet days. But at the same time, I had always been really interested in writing. Just as long as I can remember, I've always been telling stories, always had the ambition to be a writer. I went to university for creative writing. That was my undergrad degree. So, I, and really becoming a rapper was just kind of an outgrowth of writing because there's so much more writing involved in rapping, so many more lyrics per song. That was just sort of a natural progression for me to get into rap and rapping specifically. And then battle rapping was great because it gives you a very directed target to write about. So that was always very appealing to me. Um, and then but they were two very unrelated things. I was working on a novel, I was working on short stories, and then at the same time I was a battle rapper and also had a full-time job. So a lot of different paths that I was on at the time, and they kind of ended up merging because Joseph Kahn, he's a big music video director. Around this time, 2015, he was doing a lot of Taylor Swift's music videos. Yeah, I just saw on Instagram he was at her wedding the other day. We're
Really?
recording this a few days after Taylor Swift's wedding. Joseph was there, so fun little celebrity fact. But he just reached out to me on Twitter because he was a fan of battle rap, and actually the previous movie he made, Detention, had a couple of battle rappers in it who he just knew through the scene. So he'd always been kind of scouting talent in the battle rap scene. And he found out I was a writer, I think through one of my battles where an opponent had just mentioned that about me because people will always try and use personal facts against you. So someone brought that up. Joseph saw the battle and was like, "Oh, Kid Twist is a writer. Let me reach out to him." So he sent me a message on Twitter just saying, "Hey, do you write scripts?" Because he was looking for a screenwriter to work with at the time, not really thinking that he would do a battle rap movie. But the more he and I talked, the more he was like, I have always had in the back of my mind, because I'm such a fan, that I want to do a battle rap movie. Why don't you and I write one together? And that ended up being the movie Bodied that premiered at TIFF a few years later in 2017, which I now realize from being in the industry is insanely fast for a movie to happen. And only happened that way because Joseph totally funded it with his own money. He just put up his own money to make it happen. And then got a release through YouTube Premium in 2018, a little theatrical run. And the rest is history, kind of. That sort of started me down the path of screenwriting. Screenwriting was always something I was interested in. So it's not like it was a total change of course for me, but I had been working more towards novels, short stories, that kind of thing. So it definitely brought me into a new medium. But it's been very exciting because this is really how modern stories are told. You know what I mean? As much as literature may be my first love, it sadly doesn't have the cultural cachet that it once did. So it's certainly very exciting to be involved in screenwriting at a time when so many people, it seems like, are really getting into film and taking it more seriously. Um, so yeah, this is just like where it's happening. You know what I mean? This is where the culture has moved to. So it's exciting to be involved as a storyteller.
That's awesome. I mean, that it sounds like that opponent really helped you out by bringing up the
Yeah,
the
he did.
writing.
I don't know for sure that that was the case because Joseph is a very chaotic person, I guess you could say, in a great way because he just has so much going on all the time. He's always doing 10 projects at once. Like he was literally driving between editing music videos and ads at the same time as we were shooting Bodied. And he said that was like a slow time for him. So yeah, he couldn't quite remember exactly how he got it in his head that I was a writer, but I suspect that that's what happened.
I guess also did you I mean by it's live action, but did you expect to start to get involved in animation after that? Because there's been a lot of your projects since then.
Yeah, that's kind of been coincidental. It wasn't my intent. I've always loved animation. A lot of my favorite films are animated films, especially some of Miyazaki's stuff. Princess Mononoke is always up there for me in greatest of all time rankings. But yeah, it hadn't been my intent, but it's just what I got the opportunity to do. Firstly with Yasuke through Flying Lotus. He's the one who brought me into that project. He was an executive producer and also did the whole score, which is incredible, absolutely incredible score on that show. And he just saw Bodied at a film festival and tweeted about it. So, like, my whole career has happened through Twitter, basically. So I hit him up, like, hey, you know, big fan. You ever need someone to write something? And it just so happened he was involved with this Netflix show, Yasuke, and brought me in on it, which was incredible. So yeah, so that kind of started my animation career, and then through Bodied, I met Adi Shankar, who was doing a lot of work with Joseph at the time, was a producer on Bodied, actually has a hilarious cameo in Bodied. And he and I started working on some stuff with Joseph. And then he also had the animated stuff going on because that was right when Castlevania was coming out. So he was making a really big push into animation and ended up just hiring me to write a script and then write another script. And it sort of just snowballed from there.
All right, that's awesome. I was gonna ask, so the development for DMC, when I looked it up, a lot of it started in like 2018, but then I think the main writing didn't start until 2021. What was the timeline like for writing that series and how you got
Oh,
involved in
interesting.
it?
You got some inside info. I don't know. I
Thank
don't
you.
know where
Yeah.
you're getting this info. Um, let's see. I think it's fine. I think I'm always like, what can I say or not say because of NDAs and everything. But I think at this point, the show's, been out for years, so I don't think it's a problem to talk about it. But what happened was, I believe Addy got the rights in 2018, but we didn't really start working on it until 2019, like basically right when DMC5 came out, that's when we were really getting into working on it. So DMC5 was actually extremely influential on the overall direction of the series, even though we were, you know, doing an alternative timeline. And yeah, so the scripts were actually written in 2019. Like we did actually write the whole season 1 in 2019. Then there was just a lot of behind the scenes stuff happening. Things are always very complicated in Hollywood. Anyone will tell you it takes years to kind of get a project up and going. And then so 2021, you're right, that's when production started and we did a big pass on the scripts. So there was a lot of changes, but the essence of the scripts, I mean the story and everything is still the exact same as it was in the 2019 version. So yeah, so there you go. There you go. A refined timeline for you, but you weren't too far off.
Thank you. I mean, did you guys also start the season two like scripts around that time too? Because it was a really fast turnaround from one to two.
It was, yeah. So season 2, let's see. Now, actually, I might be messing up the timeline because that season 1 revision pass was maybe we started late 2021, but I actually think it was really 2022. And then we started season 2 right after that in 2022. So yeah, season 2 was like 2022 to 2023. We were working on that. And then yeah, people don't I didn't realize for sure, but this is just how long it takes to produce animation at this quality level. Same thing on Yasuke. It really takes 3 years, like 2.5 to 3 years is the production cycle for a season to get this quality. So it seems crazy to be talking about it now in 2026 that the season just came out. I'm like, yeah, this is what I was working on 4 years ago, you know. But that's just that's how it is. That's the realistic timeline for how long it takes these things to happen. So I think it's also that's been a big learning curve for me as well, because in a way you have to predict where the market is going to be. There are certain things that when we wrote them in the scripts in season one in 2019, we weren't thinking this is going to come out in 2025. Trends change, audiences' expectations change, all that. So you always have to be like a fortune teller in a way. And this is why I love working with Addy because he actually is really good at that. Like when he told me that we were doing a whole new metal soundtrack, I was like, I'm an elder millennial, so I remember when new metal was popular and the big backlash against it. So I'm like Limp Bizkit isn't cool. Why are we doing that? But Addy is smart enough now. He's like, no, kids think it's cool. Kids are gonna think it's cool in 2025 when this show comes out because they don't have the baggage that you and I have. This is gonna be a resurgent genre, and he was completely correct. So big props to him for that because I think that's actually been a huge part of the show's success that he was able to successfully predict where music trends would be by the time the show came out.
Yeah, I mean the soundtrack is a big part of it. And I was also wondering just like when you guys first started out, like as soon like when you get down to write the script for the first time, where did you like want to map it out to go? What was your first like instinct of what we have to do?
Um, hmm. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into the inside baseball because again, I'm always
Oh yeah, yeah, no
uncertain
worries.
what details to put out there publicly. But I'll just say there were many different angles discussed, many different versions that we could have gone with. And especially when you're working on something that is an adaptation of a franchise that's so popular, you're always thinking about fan expectations, but then you're also thinking about reaching a wider audience. And then at the end of the day, the most important thing I think is to just make a show that is successful on its own terms. Um, Regardless of any of those considerations. So there's so many different things swirling around. There were so many different versions of the show discussed. And it's also there's always the what if, right? Because in a way our approach has been very validated because the show's a big hit, but it's also like, well, but what if we went with version 2A? Would that have been an even bigger hit? You don't know. So you sort of just have to have confidence in the direction that you went.
I guess also one of the things I'm curious about is the choice of villains for the show, especially because I feel like having the White Rabbit as the villain in season one, he's great in the show, but in the manga he's like a really minor character. And then
Mhm.
Arias was in DMC 2, which is a controversial game. Like, what was the idea behind creating those two within the story?
I mean, certainly part of it, and this is all Addy, by the way. I mean, he's the mastermind. He's the mastermind of everything. So the choice of villains was definitely very much driven by him. So I can't take credit for any of this, but I think it worked out very well because what he theorized, and I think was proven correct, is when you take a villain who's doesn't play as major a role within the existing canon, you have a bit of a freer hand in how you adapt them, which works really well for our show because it's a different timeline. The events are different. We need to be able to shape things in a certain way. And the villain is a major part, obviously, of shaping the storyline. So being able to take those villains and transform them a little bit for the purposes of our story was, I think, a very good call. And in particular, both of them just have such iconic looks. So when you have a character with that strong of a presence visually, especially in animation, you can and then you're able to fill in the details because people aren't bringing so many expectations to them as they would to a villain like Arkham or a villain like Mundus. Then you're really able to create something that stands out, I think. And I think we were pretty successful. I mean, looking at the feedback on both of the seasons, I think the villains did really stand out and were an integral part of the show. So I think that theory was quite validated.
And then also, yeah, Arias, I feel in particular, shines a lot in the second one with Graham McTavish voicing
Hmm.
him.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion between Addie and I, like, what's his voice gonna be? And then, like, even what accent is he gonna have? Things like that. And then Addie was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna get Graham, and that just solves the problem. It was just great call, great call.
I think one of the most striking parts of season one is episode six, when it has very little dialogue. I'm curious if that was always the goal with that one was to try to write like that, and if it was more challenging to do it like that.
Yeah, that was definitely always a big part of the plan for the season was to have this one episode that we were thinking of as the music video episode. And that again was very driven by Addie, just wanting to do something new, something that would challenge us as writers, and something that we felt, if done correctly, could be a huge standout moment, which I think it was. So, very proud of that episode, definitely. It was a challenge, but it's interesting because it's a different kind of challenge than writing just a normal episode of TV. So for me, it was almost the most fun one to write, I think, because it is such a unique challenge, and it's like, okay, well, nobody's coming into this with any sort of preconceived notion of what this episode should be. So let's go crazy. And so it was very challenging in one sense and constraining in one sense because we're not using any dialogue. But then in another sense, it was very freeing because it's like, all right, well, total blank canvas, we can do this however we want.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's probably one of the best, or at least for me, one of the best emotional beats in this story. And then to kind of go a bit, it's a bit of a 180, but I really like hearing screenwriters talking about their approach to action sequences
Mm.
and how specific they like some people like to be really specific with what the characters are doing, and then others like to be vague, so it's just like up to the storyboards. I wonder what your approach to that is.
My approach is always I always want to have something in the script. I know that, like you said, there are a lot of people who their philosophy is they just say, and then they fight and give the artist total free reign, which is great because you want to have the artist bringing their own creativity to it. So I kind of take a middle view where I never want to write the screenplay in a way that suggests it has to be exactly like this because you want people to put their own artistry into things. But at the same time, I want to paint a picture in someone's mind when they're reading the script so they get an idea of at least what the vibe is. So I view it as I'm gonna write out a specific uh action scene with at least some key moves and then maybe some vague descriptions in between the key moves to get us from point A to point B. And then they can take that and if they throw it out and do their own thing, great. If they use that as a base and then build on top of it, great. Um, so yeah, so I always try and give something, and also it's just more fun for me if I, to put something into it on the script end. It's been interesting on Devil May Cry specifically. Obviously, different artists come at it from a different perspective. So on Captain Laserhawk, for instance, that was very driven by Bobby Pills. They had some great ideas of specifically how the action should look. So not as much was used from the script for those particular action scenes. And then in Devil May Cry, it's a bit more of, again, a middle ground where Muir does use a lot of the stuff from the scripts, but then they add so much more to it to make those fantastic action scenes. But they do kind of use the skeleton of, okay, these are the beats of the fight. And then in between that, we go crazy. So I think that's been a good collaboration between Addie and myself and the amazing team at Studio Mir, who are obviously incredible at their jobs.
I mean, it shows like all the action scenes have a ton of like kineticism to them, and I was wondering if you could talk like some specifics, like the bit in season one of like the motorcycle chase when he starts
Mm.
swinging it around like a
Yep.
mace, and then in season two when he's fighting Virgil, like there's a lot of great ones.
Yeah, totally. I mean, for things like that, those are kind of both really good examples of what I'm talking about, where the script had some specific beats in it that Studio Mir took, and then they just ran with it to create those incredible action sequences. So, like in 103, there were certain things in there like he flips through the car, he grabs the Agni and Rudra sword and uses that on Echidna. He hits them with the motorcycle, like all that stuff. So those kind of beats were in the script, but then there's just so many specific moments of like exactly when it goes slow motion, or like Dante hits a kid, like jumps over Echidna and hits her with the back wheel and then throws the sword at her. Just like so much stuff like that really gives it um its appeal and kineticism, like you're saying, and that's all mirror. So they kind of take that like very basic structure from the script, and I did have a bunch of other stuff in the script too that they're like, okay, this stuff we got something better than that. So yeah, they really made those scenes what they are. But I was proud that the sort of skeleton that I had in there did end up working out really well, and they were able to build on that.
I feel like the scenes in season two of Dante and Virgil fighting would be pretty tricky to write out, especially like when they're fighting in DC. Because like I feel like when you're writing it on paper, you have to make sure it's not just like, oh, the swords hit, then they hit again. Like it's like how
Yeah,
do you go
that's a
about making it
that's
like
a big
varied?
thing for sure. Like we always try and make sure there's some moves specified in the script just to give a vibe of like this is how the fight should be, or even describing a fighting style. Like Virgil is more precise and technical. Dante is more big swings and wild. And then I think they realized that in the fight really, really well. So sometimes it's about like, here are some specific moves that you can use as an idea. Sometimes it's about here's the vibe of the fight. Here's how it should feel.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool. I think I was also wondering, focus more on the characters themselves. How do you go about giving each person a distinct voice and like because I mean it's a show with a lot of larger than life personalities from a game with a lot of larger than life person. I don't know, are you a big fan of the game for the
I
show?
well, I am now,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was an interesting collaboration between myself and Addy because he is like a huge fan of the games, has been playing them for 20 plus years. I'm just I'm not a huge gamer myself, I'll be honest. So I was aware of the games, but I had never played them until we started working on the project. Now, of course, they're some of my favorite games. Um, yeah, so yeah, in terms of sorry, your question was about how do you capture the emotion and characters from the
Yeah,
game?
sorry, just like
Yeah.
helping to like make each one feel like as distinct as they would be in the source material.
Yeah, that is interesting because you're weaving together so many different things in an adaptation. And when you're adapting from a game specifically, so much of the game experience is the player being the characters themselves. So there is the Dante we know from the cutscenes in the games, and then there's the Dante that you, the player, have experienced as being an extension of yourself. So it's actually a very tricky challenge as opposed to adapting something like a book where it's a story that's being given to you. Because in a game, it's a story that you're essentially helping create, even though I think sometimes people perceive of like, oh, there's the story of the cutscenes and then there's the game, and those are sort of two separate things. But I think how you experience the story given to you in those cutscenes is very dependent on how you've been playing the game. And oftentimes, of course, especially in modern games, your choices really do affect how that story unfolds. So it is a very tricky challenge. I think the biggest thing is just having a particular take on the characters that is grounded in how they appear in the games and the appeal that they have to people who are fans of the games, but then making sure that in the show, in the adaptation, they are presented as a coherent character that is a particular vision that you as the creators have. And that may be different from the version of those characters that exists for other people. And as we've learned, but of course, as we knew going into it, it's an inevitable reality of this sort of adaptation.
I think it also helps a lot with the voice cast is obviously really good. I
Mhm.
was wondering if you wrote a lot of these characters with the voices in mind. One of which I thought really stands out is love Kevin Conroy as
Mhm.
Baines, especially.
Yeah, that was incredible. I mean, just the honor of having him involved in the show. That was a massive highlight for sure. Extremely tragic that it did end up being his last recorded role. Um, yeah, the voices in general, the only one who Addy always had in mind was Johnny as Dante, which has been a controversial choice because he's the voice of Nero in the games. But in some sense, I think it was a perfect choice. A, because sometimes you sound like your uncle. You know what I mean? If my uncle came into this interview and started talking, we'd kind of sound similar, right? But also he's just such an integral part of the franchise as a whole that he's been an amazing representative and face of the game or face of the show, in addition to, of course, just being an incredibly talented voice actor, one of the best working, if not the best, and just nailed the role. So that was always in Addie's plans. I think everybody else was much more up in the air, and that's kind of a really interesting part of working on any sort of script is you don't know until the character is cast who this character really is because you have an idea of them as the writer, but the experience that the audience is going to get is so dependent on the actor. And you might find someone who is not who you expected for the role, but who ends up being completely perfect. And then the character changes to match this person you've cast. So that's one of the things that I love about screenwriting specifically is it is such a collaboration because it's like that at every stage. It's like at the art, the casting, everything has to combine and align in order to create the finished product. So it's never like in some sense we get too little credit as writers, in some sense we get too much credit as writers because we're not really defining these characters totally by ourselves, even though some people may look at it that way. It like the character of Dante in the show is a collaboration between Addie, me, everyone else on the high level creative team, and then of course Mir and how they render him, and Johnny and how he acts him. So everything is combined. It's no like one person's vision of Dante. It's all of these uh, talents in different realms combining to create the character as you see him.
I think one of the characters I feel like that would really affect is I don't know if this is always the intention, but I like that with the White Rabbit. He presents himself as this kind of like fancy British man. He's based off like Alice in Wonderland, Steve Carell, but
Hmm.
then the actor who plays him was Japanese, I think when I looked it up. I think
Yeah.
that contrast really helps to like show it fits the character. He's not what he seems.
Yes, exactly. And he's like so over the top and cartoonish. It's almost like if you got someone who had sort of like close to that real accent, it almost doesn't work. You know what I mean? Because it has to be like someone who doesn't exist in real life at all. It has to be totally over the top, totally like it's out of another dimension.
I know both him and Arias are like very theatrical in their own ways. I
Hmm.
feel like that'd be fun to write.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, villains are definitely often the most fun characters to write. So that's we take great joy in that for sure.
I think sometimes I see writers they talk about how they'll write all this like additional backstory for a lot of their characters. And I saw an interview where Addy said that he wanted even a henchman like Plasma, the shapeshifter, to have like his own mini arc and like motivations for joining. I'm wondering if you're a fan of doing that sort of thing, like backgrounds, backstories for your characters, even if it doesn't fully appear within the story.
Yeah, for sure. And that's definitely something in Devil May Cry and Captain Laserhawk, any project that you see that Addie and I have collaborated on. There is so much stuff that we have talked about and imagined that doesn't appear in the final product, sometimes to our chagrin. But I think that just helps make the world feel fuller because yeah, there was in one version of the scripts there was a whole arc for Plasma that I think made his sacrifice at the end hit harder. But in a sense, I think you can watch the show and kind of feel that even if it's not on screen, you can feel that we've put thought into this character. And it's like that for almost every sort of minor character in the show or in Captain Laserhawk, um, where they feel like they have a full life outside of this script. And that's probably because we've figured out what their life is outside of the script. And maybe we even tried to put it in the script. And then Netflix told us this is 45 pages. What are you doing?
Are you able to say what some of the like backstories you had cut were, like what Plasma did, or would you rather leave that
I don't
mysterious?
really want to put that out there because I feel like my personal philosophy is what's on screen is reality. So when creators kind of come after the fact and say, "Oh, well, this actually happened and that," I'm like, "Well, you say that, but I think the reality is the universe that's been created through the show, through the actual story." So I'm not a fan of providing like extraneous details beyond what's
That's
been shown. And
fair.
hey, you know what? It might come up later and we might change our minds. So that's also part of the strategy there.
Awesome. I think also, I mean, it's like a side note, but Laserhawk has some really awesome world building. When I
Yeah.
feel like that one,
Oh yeah.
I can tell like even just watching it, like it felt very like it kind of felt like Paul Verhoeven while watching it. There's a lot of like satire about
Yes.
like corporations and like ad
Mhm.
with Rayman especially.
Yeah, yeah. Verhoeven for sure was a major, major influence. I would say probably a major influence on everything Addy does. I mean, if you watch the Power Ranger short film that he and Joseph did, because Joseph is a huge Verhoeven fan as well. So that one I think extremely Verhoeven influenced on the Power Ranger short. Yeah, that was definitely a big thing. And yeah, there's oh man, there's so much Laserhawk stuff that didn't make it into the final show. But again, I think you feel it because, of
Mhm.
course, the artists had read it all, so they had that in mind, and I think it's realized visually and in the vibe of the show, even if the specific backstory isn't all the time shown to the audience.
Yeah, I think like one of the things I saw was for the Power Rangers parody in Laserhawk. Originally they were written as more like Rainbow Six, like and then that sort of evolved.
Yeah, yeah. Which, yeah, I'm, and I'm not privy to all the behind the scenes stuff. I don't know if Ubisoft might have balked at actually calling them the Rainbow Six. But I do think it ended up being a very fun parody. That I think you still get the root of it is there's six of them and they're a rainbow, but they really became their own thing.
Yeah, man, I think it works even better too because then you get the mech scenes later on.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And then I guess just along with obviously DMC season 3, congrats on that.
Thank you.
Are there any other IPs or projects you're hoping to tackle in the future?
There are many. There are many. Nothing I can talk about, but there are many. I will say, uh, for me, this is just me speaking personally. I'm certainly interested in doing original ideas, but that's the big challenge in Hollywood right now, right? It's like the audience really wants to see original ideas. The writers really want to write original ideas, but there's so much money involved. It's always seen as a risk if something isn't coming from IP isn't already known to be popular. So I would love to be one of the few who figures out how to make original ideas happen. Because I think there's so much of the audience that wants to see that and would respond really well if it's done at the right level. So that's all I'll say. But yeah,
That's
I'm interested in figuring that out, and that may be part of the journey that I'm on with Addy as well. We'll see.
Would do you think you'd want to return to live action, or are you gonna, or would you mostly like to do animation now you've gotten a taste for it?
I love animation. So if my career ends up being mostly in animation, I certainly wouldn't be mad. But there is something special about live action just in terms of the privilege of being on set, like the experience from my point of view of making the thing. It's of course amazing to see, on an animated show to start to see the character designs come back and the rough cuts, the animatics, which is when they put the storyboard together with like semi animation and the voices to start to see it come to life. That is incredibly cool. But for me personally, there's really nothing cooler than being on a set and there are real people walking around looking like the characters you've imagined and delivering the lines you wrote. And usually making something out of it that you never expected, and you're seeing it happen right in front of your eyes. I mean, that is pretty incredible. So I am kind of itching to get back into live action at some point, at least for perhaps a project here and there. But we will see. I never expected to be a screenwriter in the first place, so we'll
Lo and behold.
see. We'll see where it takes me. That's kind of been the arc of my whole life, is just seeing where things take me.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Alex. Really had a great time talking with you. Hopefully, we can talk again at some point in the future. Definitely like to
Yeah,
see talk more after DMC season 3 is out.
absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
All right. Have a great one.
All right, man.